Hey guys, welcome back to Fix It Friday. So this week we're going to be working on something that's really rare and cool, and this is the Sharp SF1 television. This is a Super Famicom that is combined with a CRT, and these were only produced in Japan, either in a 14-inch version like this or a 20-inch version, and this was the result of a partnership between Sharp and Nintendo. There's actually a lot of really cool history about Sharp partnering up with Nintendo on a variety of different projects. So they also made the Sharp Twin Famicom, the Sharp Nintendo TV, and a whole bunch of other things. And there's actually a lot of relation between the employees of Sharp and Nintendo. So for example, Gunpei Yokoi, he actually used to work at Sharp before he moved over to Nintendo. And I think the vice versa is also true. So anyhow, it's a really cool piece of video gaming history. And this was actually a donation by Joey, and I cannot thank him enough for this donation. And once this thing is repaired, we're going to have it at the next Long Island Retro Gaming Expo so that everyone can enjoy it. All right, so this particular unit has a number of different problems. So the CRT itself has issues, and then the Sharp SF1 does not work at all. It just boots to a black screen. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take this thing apart, have a look inside, see what's going on, and we're going to try to fix at least some of the problems. I don't think I'm going to necessarily get everything resolved in this video, but I just wanted to give you guys a feel for what it looks like inside, how it works, and hopefully resolve at least some of the issues that this thing has. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so I have the SF1 plugged in, and I just wanted to show you what the CRT itself is doing. And so you can see it has some horizontal collapse on both sides. And I believe there's issues with convergence and then probably a whole bunch of other stuff. So I am out of my league a little bit on this. This is not the kind of thing I have a lot of experience with working on, but of course I'm always up to the task. So I'll just show you really quick. If I toggle this button here, this lets me go through 3 different modes. Right now it's like looking for a video input on the composite ports. And then if I press this, I believe this is the Super Famicom mode. And of course, there's nothing plugged in right now, so it's not going to detect that. And then of course, here's your RF. So this would be your normal broadcast information. You've got your channel inputs, your volume inputs over here. I believe these are settings for the CRT, but you can see that like things are not looking good. Like this should be a solid line. And so I think there's issues with convergence on the neck. Yeah, so it's going to be a lot of work to get the CRT going, but I kind of just wanted to illustrate what it's doing, and we're going to try to use it in order to get the actual Super Famicom motherboards up and running. Okay, so let's go ahead and take this thing apart. So first thing you need to do is remove a few screws on the outer part of the shell. So there's 2 here in the corner, there's 1 right here where the power plug is, and then there's a much smaller one right over here where the composite video and mono sound jack are. So once you get those out, it should just lift up like this. And there we go. So as it's pretty clear, I've actually already been inside of this console because the SF1 actually, the Super Famicom sits right here. I've already gone ahead and removed it, and I did some work on this off camera. But yeah, I have detailed videos on how to take this thing apart, and so if you have a look at the link, you can go take a look at that and see how you actually take apart the SF1. But yeah, let's go ahead, and now that we've got the lid off, let's put it on the bench and have a look at the analog board of the monitor. Okay, so now that the back has been removed, we can get a good look on the inside. And you can see that the SF1 really bears, mostly looks like a standard CRT. You've got your neck board, your tube, you've got your analog board. It does have a transformer here on the inside. And yeah, otherwise, you wouldn't necessarily know there's anything special going on here. However, like I was saying beforehand, the SF1 does go up here. This is where it normally sits. You can see how close it is to this tube. And so this thing generates a decent amount of heat. All that heat comes up here. And my guess is that a combination of a lot of heat and humidity over time is what killed the SF1 and probably what killed this board as well. So there's a harness that comes from up above here, and this runs down to the analog board. And so this sends the video signal to this board and the mono sound as well. The power from the transformer also goes up to the Super Famicom from here. And so yeah, you can see that the S-Video and I believe the mono sound, yeah, they do. They both come into this little daughter board, so it looks like there is some additional processing to the video and audio signals before they're fed into the CRT. So I have done some work on this already. I cleaned the hell out of this thing. It was absolutely filthy. I mean, this is one of the dirtiest CRTs I've ever worked on before. And it looks a lot better now, but I mean, in the beginning, you couldn't touch anything, not only on the outside, but I mean, not only the inside, but the outside too. It was really, really bad. There's still dirt in here, but you know, I got rid of enough of it so that I can live with it. I also replaced a lot of the electrolytics. You can see them here with a dot. Those are all ones that are new. That didn't have any effect on the problem, but I'm not really surprised about that. I've changed them out more just as a preventative measure because, again, I got the impression this thing has been used a lot, so it makes sense to just refresh them and put new ones in before the old ones fail. And it's behaving exactly the same as it did before, so what I really think is that there's an issue with partial horizontal collapse. So my guess is that it's probably this IC right here. I think this is the horizontal output transistor. There's another one over here as well, which my guess is that that's vertical. But again, I'm not sure. I don't have schematics for this CRT, and my personal experience with CRT repair isn't so extensive. So it is going to be a challenge to get this thing running, and I'm probably going to work with some friends who are much more knowledgeable than I am at CRT repair. And hopefully between the collective efforts of all of us, we can get this thing running again. All right, so now let's turn our attention to the Super Famicom portion of this thing. Okay, so now that we've looked at the monitor, let's have a look at the Super Famicom itself. And so that's what you are seeing here. And yes, I actually have two of them. So one of these, this one right here, this is the one that was inside of the 14-inch monitor, which you know, is what we were looking at beforehand. And so you can see that it has all of the exact same chips that are inside of a standard Super Famicom or a Super Nintendo. You've got your CPU here, your PPU 1 and 2, you've got work RAM, all of the major components for a Super Nintendo or a Super Famicom can be found here. However, you can see it's really miniaturized, very compact, and you've got your multi-out here, so you can output to a second display if you want to. This is the expansion port, which I believe is only used by a few things like the Satellaview. And then this set of harnesses over here, this connects up to the CRT and sends S-Video out, and of course audio, mono sound, out to the television. You can see that this one is a lot dirtier, and that's consistent with the whole experience with this particular SF1. It was probably used a lot. It was very much in a high heat environment, and I think that's probably what killed this Super Famicom. Like the earlier CPUs are really notorious for failing, and given that this thing was probably in a high heat, high humidity environment all the time, I'm sure that's what probably cooked and killed this thing. The good thing is that because all of these chips are the same, you can actually take donor chips from another Super Famicom or even an American Super Nintendo, swap them in, and get things running. The other issue with these boards is the electrolytic capacitors. Because they're in this high heat, humid kind of environment, they fail. So I've never seen an SF1 where all the caps were not very bad and needed to be replaced. So I'm going to go ahead and replace all of these. So let's have a look at this board right here. So this board is Joey's, and so this is for his 20-inch SF1, and you can see that it is a lot cleaner, it's in much better shape, and I think that's, again, probably because the physical distance that this thing has from the actual CRT is much better on the 20-inch. Like this is like sitting right on top of the CRT, so it really gets cooked. This thing, I think, is further away, so it's not so close to the heat, although it can have the exact same problems. It can have issues with failing chips, and it can have issues with electrolytics. In fact, if you have a look right here at this capacitor, you can see electrolyte right on the board all over the place. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and start with recapping both of these and seeing what that does. All right, so let's get started with that. Okay, so I have the Super Famicom board plugged in for the 20-inch, and I just wanted to show you what it's doing. So as you can see, it is producing sound and S video on this unit here. So that's good, actually. So that means that actually the fundamentals on this one are pretty decent. We know that the CPU's working, the PPU's working. This is Yoshi's Island. You know, it looks horrible, but that's because my CRT here needs some repair. But you can also tell that there's other problems too, because we're not getting composite video. I'm also using the multi-out jack over here. We're getting sound on that display right there, but we're not getting composite video. So yeah, there's clearly problems, but this particular Super Famicom board is not as bad as I initially thought. I think probably all the chips are fine. I'm gonna have to maybe replace all the capacitors and maybe do some repair on the traces themselves. All right, so let's see what happens. Okay, so we're back with the SF1, and this time I have a flash cartridge plugged in because that's probably going to be a lot more useful for some of the diagnostic questions I have now. So you can see it still looks very sad and awful on the SF1 CRT. But then, now if you go over here to my test monitor, you can see that I have just composite video cables connected over to there, and we have a picture now. So that's great. So it looks like replacing the capacitors on the SF1 board got composite video restored on this system. I also tested RGB on a PVM that I have off camera, and that also is working. So I believe now we have all of our video and audio signals coming out of this board. So we've got composite, S-video, RGB, stereo sound, mono sound, all of that is great. However, we're not totally out of the woods yet when it comes to repairing this SF1 board. So I'm gonna just plug in a controller really quickly, and I'm gonna go to, I have the burn-in test cartridge ROM. This is an extremely useful program to have to test faults on Super Nintendos. So I'm gonna run this burn-in test. Now, let's see what it does. It'll go through a whole sequence of tests. And you can see almost everything passes except for one thing, and I don't know if it's legible on camera, but the one thing that's failing is CG RAM right over here. So I looked that up because thankfully, you know, a lot of people have gotten various failure modes on the burn-in cart, and it can often point to what is, you know, faulty, whether it's the CPU, PPU1, PPU2, maybe the RAM chips. And although this says CG RAM, actually what's at fault most likely is PPU2. Now, I looked at PPU2, and it happens to be right next to those 220 microfarad capacitors. So they are right over here, these two big guys right here. These are the ones that leaked really, really badly on the board. And here's PPU2 right here. So it's possible that some of that electrolyte got in and killed that chip. That happens from time to time. It's also possible that the chip just died on its own, or it's marginally working on its own, because that can happen too. Like I was saying, these are the older revision chips. They're definitely more prone to failure than some of the later 3-chip consoles, and certainly the later consoles that are 1-chip. So yeah, what I think I'm going to do now is go ahead and remove this PPU2, and I have a donor board, and what I'm going to do is pull the PPU2 off of that and swap it in and see if this resolves the error. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with that. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and remove the PPU2 chip over here, because that burn-in test does suggest that this has some kind of fault. And it's also something I saw when I was playing certain games where there were graphical glitches and such. So what I have here is a replacement PPU. So this is a revision B of the PPU. So this is a much newer version. These are way more reliable by comparison. So the way that I remove chips like this is I use Chip Quick. So this is a low temperature solder, and I'll just add some flux around the borders and then use this and a hot air gun to just loosen this whole thing up, and it should just lift right off. I'm gonna be especially careful over here where there was the capacitor leakage. Once that's all done, I'm gonna clean the area, make sure that there's no cap juice underneath here, get it all nice and clean, and then we're gonna solder on the new PPU. All right, let's get to it. Alright, so the PPU is now soldered in place, and I have to say it's a little bit harder putting this one on as compared to doing it on a standard Super Nintendo or Super Famicom. I think these pads are actually a little bit thinner, so you've got to have everything lined up like really, really, really perfectly. But once I took care of that, it was pretty straightforward from there. So I took a very careful look. I don't have any bridges between the pins. There might be some pins that are still not quite soldered on enough, so I might have to come back and, you know, reflow this thing. But otherwise, it looks great, and let's go ahead and plug it into the Sharp SF1 and see if it works. Okay, so I've got everything plugged in, and now's the moment of truth. Let's turn this thing on and see if it works. Okay, well, that is a good start. So it's booting up to the EverDrive menu, and that's exactly the way that it was beforehand. That's really good. So let's go ahead, and I'm gonna move the camera over here so that you can see the composite video image, because looking at the other TV is kind of sad and pointless right now. All right, so let's go to the burn-in. Okay, so far so good. So now let's do the test and see if it actually passes all the tests. Oh man, it passed. Yes, okay. This is awesome. All right. So yeah, it's doing the proper test now. So now I'm gonna watch this and just make sure it works. But yeah, this is exactly what it's supposed to do. I really love the burn-in test because it uses this SNES rendition of Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link, and it just sounds so awesome. All right, this is awesome. I'm pretty sure that I've got this thing working, and yeah, I think we're in business here. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead off camera and just test a couple games and make sure that they're fine, but I'm gonna call this thing repaired. So now I'm gonna go ahead and send this back to Joey so he can have his Sharp SF1 totally fully functional. And yeah, in the next episode of Fix It Friday, I'm gonna tackle this board right here. We'll see if we can get this thing running. And then finally, I'm gonna have to work on the CRT, and that's gonna be, you know, a process. I don't expect to get that done right away, but at least this way, you know, I'm making some progress here, and hopefully we will have a fully restored and fully working SF1 in the not too distant future. All right, so that's it for this week's video. If you guys like this kind of content, then consider subscribing to the channel. I've got videos out like this every Friday, and of course, if you have something that you need repaired or modified, you can always reach me directly at oneuprestorations.com. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.